Hello, everybody. We have the amazing privilege of having Jeanne Clunn here. Jeanne is a certified nutrition consultant, HTMA consultant, and founder of the Calm and Balanced Mama Method. Jeanne, thank you so much for being here today.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, I know, you and I have kind of been working alongside of each other for several years now, and I love what you do. I love having you come, to train in my groups and just the value that you bring to the community of women that you serve. And so I'm excited for my listeners to have a chance to follow you and get to know you a little bit better, but also just to learn a little bit more about the two biggest areas I think that you and I see collectively, even though we're serving different kind of groups of women, is mood and energy for women.
Sure.
And really like what is the kind of driving factor of that? So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? And then we'll dive into all of the nerdy good stuff that we like to talk about.
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, Jeanne. So what I do is I help moms specifically. I focus solely on moms. I have a 7-year-old and a 3.5-year-old myself. And it's that age where it's like everything is so hard, right? And so I really like to cater to that age of like the toddler moms under 5, where we're burnt out, we're depleted, we're stuck in chronic fight or flight. And it's like the stress of, yes, every day, but also our lifestyles and our past history has finally really just caught up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do with my clients is I help them to repair their metabolism, repair their adrenal function, support their adrenals so that they don't have to be so focused on like the fact that, my kid was just screaming in the background, right? Like
Right.
that
Yeah.
would stress a lot of women out. And it's like, we can't control that when we have kids. So let's build this internal resilience so that we can
Yes.
live life and live motherhood and just enjoy this stuff that we're doing without feeling so bogged down every day.
Wow. I love that because one, that I just so resonates. I would have been that mom signing up for your course like 10 years ago because I'm like, that was me. And I think so many women don't know that they don't have to feel that way. And I
Yes.
know that like we spend a lot of time like really just encouraging women like, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. You don't like, it's not a badge of honor to be suffering, it's not a badge of honor to be fatigued and exhausted. That's not a mark of a good mom. And it's not saying you're a bad mom for feeling that way, but I think sometimes we do wear that like I'm exhausted because I'm doing so much
You
when
mean
really,
mom tired's not a thing?
I mean, it definitely is, but not in the way they think,
Right.
right? And so, but realizing that like so many women don't understand that we don't just bounce back
Mm.
necessarily from, like you said, all of the years of not taking care of ourselves or poor mineral absorption or poor digestive function. And then, we're surprised when we get to postpartum and our child, or our child is weaned and we still feel like garbage, right? And so, can you help just kind of explain to me and my listeners what is some of the physiologic, like what's going on in their physiology that keeps them stuck in that place of, the low energy, that kind of heightened stress response, fight or flight, etc.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you can look at it. The bottom line, it's stressors. Okay. Stressors are the things that cause us stress. Stress is the physical impact from it. Okay. And I think that people don't even realize the difference in that. So it's these stressors. We have the mental, emotional stressors, the kids screaming, the bills, somebody always has to be fed all the time. But then there's these physical stressors of the pregnancy, of the fact that we're not eating, that our blood sugar is so dysregulated because a meal for a mom looks like eating the crust that the kid didn't eat off their peanut butter and jelly over the sink while also trying to do the dishes and hold the toddler on the hip,
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these things, they're constantly increasing our energy demands in our body, creating imbalance. And then the body can only compensate for so long. It can only do that for so long until, the flip side of that is that we become depleted.
Right.
And we don't have anything left. And that's when it's like, oh my gosh, like I have women that I work with where they go fast and furious until Wednesday, and then Wednesday to Saturday, they're asleep on the couch,
Mm-hmm.
making up for just being able to, do the
Right.
minimum for 2 days, right? And
Right.
it's that state of depletion where we have been exposed to these stressors, causing stress on our body for so long that at some point we just can't keep up. Like we don't have the energetic capability to keep up, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's such a hard place to be too, because it's like you need energy to move forward,
Right.
but you have no energy. And so it's just, I remember feeling like in this place of, just stuckness. Like I don't even know what else to call it. Like it was just stuckness because I didn't know what to do to feel better. I didn't have the energy to like make that step forward until like I started having panic attacks. And then it was, okay, I definitely can't do this. And so I'm going to have to muster the energy to figure this out.
Right.
And so can you speak to kind of how do you help women get out of that place of, of the overwhelm? Because a lot of it is physiological, right? And so there are things we have to do to shift the physiology, but but how do you help them to kind of take some of those baby steps?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really good question. And there's obviously the basics. Like everybody has to fuel their body for the demands that it has, right? But what's
Right.
so interesting about stress and the stress response is that people just think cortisol is supposed to be high, or cortisol is either high or low, right? And it's
Hmm.
not that simple. It's not
Right.
just I have high cortisol, I have low cortisol. It can be imbalanced throughout the day,
Right.
right? It can be out of whack with that diurnal rhythm, but it can also cause different imbalances in the body that cause different issues, right? So what I really like to do is, for me, within, my clients, we always do a hair trace mineral analysis,
Hmm.
because I can have 2, 3, 7 clients with the exact same symptoms. They can all be
Hmm.
really low energy. They can all be fatigued. They can all be causing panic attacks. And for one person, it could be because they have a ton of bio unavailable copper that's causing a panic attack. And another, it can be because they have no
Yeah.
calcium and magnesium, so they can't regulate their blood sugar, right? So, you know,
Yeah.
the first line of defense is we have to fuel the body for those demands that are on it,
Right.
which sounds simple. And it sounds like, duh, but
Right.
when you're in it and you're a mom, you're not,
It's
you're
not
not,
that easy.
it's
Yeah.
not, you're not, you're not eating enough. What
Right.
you are eating is pretzels and goldfish and, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So making sure you're eating regularly, making sure you're eating enough, right? Making sure that your blood sugar is balanced. And beyond that,
Right.
it's looking at, okay, what has stress done specifically to your body that is causing that manifestation of symptoms, right?
Right.
And that's where we can personalize it based on what imbalances have been created.
Absolutely. Well, and that brings me back to, again, I feel like I was not anticipating this, but I feel like I'm reliving a lot of my postpartum experience when I'm talking to you. And it's not bad at all. It just reminds me like and I was, 26 with my first daughter. So fairly young, healthy, but healthy Andrea 10 years ago is different. Like I have a different understanding of what that word means. I lived off of Taco Bell and like mac and
Right.
cheese. So it's a little bit different, but I remember that was one of the very first things that actually showed up on testing for me was that my copper was extremely high. And this was the part that shocked me. I had only been on birth control for like 6 months
Wow.
tops.
Yeah.
And, that would have been a good 3 years previous to that testing. But what it did, because my adrenals were already not in a great place, it was stuck there. And so it threw off my zinc and my B vitamins. So I wasn't making neurotransmitters anymore. And it was just a poop storm, like for a lack of a better word, the perfect setup for postpartum depression and anxiety, right?
Right.
And so I think this is the thing, like we're taught culturally that women, we just bounce back. And if we don't bounce back, our priority should definitely be losing weight, like that postpartum weight. The focus is completely wrong,
Right.
right? It's not focused on actually healing the body and addressing all of the reasons why, like why, I used to shame myself, like, why do I have such a poor stress response? Like, why can't I just be, like my friends? Or there was so much shame attached to it because I wanted to feel differently. But the truth was, it wasn't my fault. I mean, it truly was just something physiologic that was happening in the body. And realistically, it took me a good 4 to 5 years to come out of that.
Right.
Taking your clients like what, 12 weeks,
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean,
maybe,
we
maybe
get
a little
pretty
bit
far
more.
in 12 weeks, right? But it,
Yes.
everything you said, there's so much truth to it. It's like it is this perfect storm of what society is telling us we're supposed to be and do. And like I tell my clients, if a woman comes to me and she's like, oh, a goal is to lose weight, I'm like, absolutely not until your body is safe. If what you
Right.
want is weight loss, this isn't the place to do it, because we're going to balance your body first, because
Yep.
that is going to give you the ability to do everything else. If you can't
Absolutely.
lose weight, that is what I call a trailing indicator, which means there's
Yes.
a lot more that needs to be fixed before that, right? And
Absolutely.
so, to your point, like when you don't have that stress resilience, when you don't have that ability and all these other things are going on, those adrenal glands that are designed to help us respond to stress, like that's not the only thing they do, right?
Right.
We have receptors for cortisol everywhere in our body. So
Hmm.
it supports our immune system, right? They make
Right.
they make progesterone in the first half of our cycle. Half of our progesterone is made in our adrenal glands. So I mean, if they
Right.
affect
I
the sex
know. Yeah.
hormones, right? They cortisol is our main anti-inflammatory. It's like
Hmm.
you can't have all of these stressors time after time again and then just think like, why is my whole life and why is all my health going, to
Backwards, down.
blowing
Yeah.
up? Right,
Hill.
right.
Yeah.
And it is starting with internal and creating that balance so that you have the resilience for the stress, because again,
Absolutely.
you can't just get rid of the stress. You
No.
can't, the stressors
Right.
just
Well, and
don't even.
I love that you talk about that, because that was absolutely when I was in that place, when I was having panicking and anxiety and insomnia and extreme, like debilitating fatigue. I was like, if I could just eliminate all of this, which is what I did.
Mhm.
And for a period of time, that may be necessary to let the body heal, but that's different than letting that be the life goal. Do you know what I'm saying? And so, because you absolutely nailed it. When the body doesn't feel safe, and I pray that every woman that's listening to this gets this, because if the body doesn't feel safe, there's a lot of things it's not going to do for you. It's not going to digest, it's not going to absorb, it's not going to let your adrenals come out of that like
Right.
chronic inflammatory stress response to actually balance out so that you can lose weight. But that's like, again, step 3 or step 4. If we're not losing weight, there's usually, some other bigger problems that I know we're not here to talk about weight loss,
Right.
but when that's the driving focus of postpartum, which
Which is a
culturally,
huge stressor on women, is they think they have to bounce back, or they think they have to get their body back, right? And
right,
it's this vicious cycle, right? Where, as you said, like when your body doesn't feel safe, it shuts down what I call non-essential functions, right?
right.
So it shuts down the sex hormones. It shuts down,
Hmm.
like, you're not supposed to reproduce when you're under stress. You're not supposed to feel happy. You don't need to feel energized beyond spurts of energy to, like, quote unquote, run from a tiger, right? And so
Right.
it shuts down. You don't want
Yeah.
to be digesting a big old like sausage and meatball sub when you're running from a tiger. You want your energy
Yes.
to go into your limbs, right? And
Exactly.
so it's this really vicious cycle where the stressors and the stress response shuts down all these things in our body. And then
Right.
by way of those then being shut down, that creates more imbalance in the body. So, I know that you look at
Yes.
the gut a ton, and that's huge, right? So when we're
Yep.
stressed and that shuts down digestion, we can't get nutrients from our food. Well, we
Right.
actually need certain minerals to have a healthy stress response.
Right.
So now we have stress shutting down digestion, so we can't absorb the minerals. Now we can't even have a healthy stress response to
Right.
all the stressors, right?
Right.
So it's I call it the positive cortisol feedback loop is what I call it with my clients, because it's one thing feeding the other, feeding another, which keeps you stuck in
Right.
this fight or flight. And so the
Totally.
first step, you have to break that positive cortisol feedback loop,
Yep.
right? And the easiest way to do that is by telling your body through food, we're safe. Like,
Yes.
because food is energy for our body, giving it the
Mhm.
energy to respond to the stressor
Right.
takes a little bit of that burden off your body, off of the adrenals, to say like, okay, we're actually going to have the energetic capability to respond to the stressor, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And as a mom, I think this is probably one of the hardest things because we're like when we're talking about stress and digestion specifically, like most of us are interrupted how many times while we're trying to eat, right? And so I had to this as became very prominent actually when my daughter was diagnosed with pandas because she would have meltdowns all the time. And so I realized like number one, this is not going to be a time of weight loss. And so like I just knew like that is not a goal that has to go out the window. What I am going to focus on is and I feel like this could be applied to any mom in any category because essentially I went from having a neurotypical child to kind of going back to the newborn stage of dependency. And does that make sense? And so, and we all have children at different developmental stages, but it went from being able to independently eat and rest
Yeah.
to being interrupted all the time to where my eating experience is now very stressful. Like my body feels a lot of stress. And so I had to trick myself into like different ways of making eating enjoyable to where it was not stressful and it was like okay I'm going to take that psychological stress off of this to where I'm going to eat what I can. I'm going to make sure that even if it's only 5 bites, it's super nourishing. And so I am still getting really high quality nutrition, even if I can't have a full 15-minute sit down. And so maybe even sharing, I think, I know I've kind of like rabbit trailed a little bit there, but I think some practical strategies that you probably have worked through a million times with your clients about, the mom who's maybe in postpartum that knows that, needing to prioritize eating well for healthy blood sugar is really important, but doesn't know like practically how to do that. Could you share some nuggets there?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. The number one thing that I do with my clients is I tell them, you just have to eat,
Yes.
which again, it sounds so basic, but I have
It's
them
a
set
lot harder than it
alarms.
sounds.
It really is. I have them set alarms on their phone every 3 to 4 hours to
Mhm.
eat. And I'm like, I do not
Good.
care if right now what you're eating is your kid's mac and cheese. Step
Yeah.
number one is you have to eat, because when you do it in reverse, in my opinion, and what I see with the clients is when we try and focus on like what we're eating first, it becomes this big stressor that then we feel like we can't fulfill. And so then we don't do
Yeah.
it. But the flip side of that is depending on what state of stress your body is in, right? So if it is in
Yeah.
active alarm stage, fight or flight, what that means on like a biological, physiological level is that you're burning through nutrients, you're burning through minerals, right? And so
Yeah.
you actually have a higher need for them.
Right.
If you're in the exhaustion stage of stress, what that means is that you actually don't even have any nutrient stores left, right? So
Right.
what all that means is that we can't either keep up with those demands or rebuild those nutrient stores if we're not flat out eating enough food, right? So step one,
Right.
like set alarms, eat every 3 to 4 hours, because
Good.
one of those things that the adrenals and cortisol do is help to regulate blood sugar. And so if you're stressed, your blood sugar is imbalanced. I'm just telling you it is.
Right.
And so step one, you eat regularly to support that. And then you figure out, what should I be eating? What nutrients do I need? Sort of what composition do I need, right? But all that, if you're not getting in enough food, and this truly is the hardest part with my clients, right?
Hmm.
Like I literally had a one-on-one today, and we're 10 weeks in and she's eating the most perfect foods and she's doing all these things, but she's still not eating enough.
Yeah.
Right. And you
Right.
just can't rebuild a broken down body if you're not getting enough.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is that and same thing happens where, women will be like, oh yeah, I eat 1,200 calories a day. And I'm like, we need to double that. Like,
that's what your toddler's supposed to be eating.
yeah.
Right. For
like,
perspective, literally.
right.
That's what a 5-year-old should be eating.
Right. But again, it goes, any of us in our 30s, like, I don't have to even pull everybody in our 30s. I know that what you have been trained is that a 1,200 calorie diet or a 700 calorie diet is what you need to live off of. But for women's hormones, statistically, it is between 2,000 and 2,500.
Thank
For
you.
optimal. I know, I'm like, I could cry when I hear people say
Thank
that
you.
but it is so hard. And this has taken years, like, for me to heal my digestion to a point where I have an appetite in the morning. I'm hungry every 3 to 4 hours. And now, like, where I'm at is like, now I can focus on getting enough, because there was so many different layers impacting, like you were talking about, impacting why this is hard for us, right? And then you throw in children and the dog that poops on the carpet and, all of the other things that go wrong in our day to day, that it's just learning those simple, practical steps and even understanding what the problem is, that the problem isn't that you just didn't bounce back fast enough from, growing a human and giving birth to a human and breastfeeding a human. It's so much more than that. And so I love, just one, how comprehensive you are in your work with women, that you don't just stop at that surface level answer of, I'm just really tired all the time. Okay, well, let's talk about why that is. And so what would you say, this is going to be like a can of worms question, I feel like, but what would you say is the biggest mindset roadblock for the women that you work with? I know, I knew it was going to be a can of worms, but I feel like we need to go there.
Gosh, that's really, really tough, because I can, like, right off the top of my head think of probably 3. There's the obvious, like you just talked about, is like women in their 30s, we're raised on a certain sort of expectation of what we should eat. But I think beyond that, the biggest one is probably sort of the value that they place on themselves and
Yes.
feeling themselves, and that's not selfish, right? Like,
yes.
I spoke to a woman yesterday who, she pulled at my heartstrings so much. And she was like, I just can't take this time, make this investment in myself. And I'm like, you literally just told me how every single person in your family is impacted by this. Like, how you are the lifeblood of this family. And it goes back to the badge of honor, right? And the expectation that we have to do everything for everyone. And at some point, like, when you're doing it all and you're feeling good, and like, you're probably, to be honest, running on adrenaline to do that.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right?
Yep.
When you flip the other side and you have nothing left to give, everybody
pays.
Everybody pays, right? But the flip side of that is, when you invest in yourself and taking care of yourself, everybody wins.
Yeah. Well,
right?
I love that you talked about that, because I have a similar, like, conversation with women, except for that most of them, one of the catalyzing factors that gets them moving is remembering what it was like to be mothered by somebody who is exhausted, irritable, and crabby. And like, once they were able to connect, like, oh, I am that person and I don't want to be that person. And that had such a profound impact on me, and we were able to kind of dig into the, why don't you feel like you're valuable? Because you're telling me that you see that you're valuable enough to be this key player in your family. And so that's when we can kind of dig into the, like, okay, what's really keeping you from moving forward? But I think that's probably the biggest one that I hear from women as well, is just recognizing the role that they play is irreplaceable in their family, and how they show up is worth investing in.
Right.
And because this is, I mean, the rest of your legacy as a mom. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's so much. It's not just about, and I know for you, it's not just about getting rid of their symptoms. It's not just about giving them their energy back. It's about the fruit of that, which is the legacy they get to leave for their families, right?
Right.
And so in that, I think when we're presented with that choice of, okay, I could do something for myself, immediately we're going to be hit with all of the reasons why we can't, right? Or why we shouldn't. And so this is why working with somebody who can help you to navigate, for the listeners out there, help you to navigate your own mind and your own obstacles, because we all have them, right? And so what would you say to our listeners who are maybe struggling with, the mood and the fatigue and really just stuck in that kind of burnout, well, the cliche term of burnout, but however you would describe it, what would you say to them, to that person today?
I mean, straight up, that's not normal, and that anybody who tells you that that's what it's supposed to be like to be a mom, that you're supposed to be tired, that they're doing you a disservice and that you need to stand up and, think about a time when you didn't feel that way. Think about a day when you felt really good, right? Like,
Yeah,
you haven't always felt that way. And so, it's possible to feel another way. And if
exactly.
the way you're feeling today is normal, nobody would have more than one kid.
Right.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, they wouldn't. And, to your point, I just want to circle back for a minute about the mindset, because I think that it's really a double-edged sword with that, right? Like,
Mhm.
having somebody to call you on your blocks is so, so important. But also, oftentimes what I see, because I focus on women with adrenal dysfunction, is that
Mhm.
that block is just as much physiological,
Absolutely.
because
Yes.
your adrenals are designed to keep you safe.
Yep.
So when you are in chronic fight or flight, or you are in burnout, your adrenal glands are saying everything is a threat, and
Right.
changing the way you perceive yourself, your family, your worth, but also just your day to day, even small, simple shifts, right? Like,
Right.
still a change, and your body is going to say, like, whoa, 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 heck no, like, we're not safe, we're not.
Right.
And so when I hear that type of thing from a woman, especially when it's a woman who is a very strong woman, goes to work, career woman, like, I've got multiple clients who own their own law practices, like, I'm like, that's
Wow. Yeah.
actually your adrenals talking. And that's actually even more of a
Yep.
sign that we got to get after this, because that is so out of alignment
Yep.
with who you are. It's literally
Right.
your biology, right?
Absolutely.
And you fix that, and so much of this other stuff just gets plucked off.
Right. Well, it's way easier. Yeah, I was talking to my other colleague friend Stephanie. She's been on previous episodes, but we were talking about this too. Like, we can't, if we don't have the physiology in place to even get to those places, like the deeper rooted
You
places in
can't.
our mind, there's no way, because you
Right.
don't have the energy. Like, I'm
Right.
not going to be able to deal with my, you know, deeply rooted emotional trauma from 20 years ago if my adrenals think that we are still 20 years ago. Like,
Exactly.
so we have to address that stuff. And that's one of the reasons why, one, I love that you start with the HTMA. You get their physiology on board like right away. You get them some of those quick wins that help them to see, like, oh, I can actually feel better, which then, of course, it just helps them to feel supported and engaged and all of those things. And so, gosh, I feel like we could talk forever on
Probably.
this stuff. So I would love to have you on again, but I want to make sure that our listeners know how to find you, because what you do is just phenomenal. And so if you are in this season of life that Jeannie was talking about, and this resonates with you, Jeannie, I would just love for you to share how they can best reach you.
Yeah, sure. I've got a website, jeannieclunn.com. I'm sure you can put the spelling.
Yes.
I'm on Instagram at Nutrition Jeannie. And then I have a Facebook group. It's called Mom Life or Adrenal Fatigue.
Perfect.
Spoiler
Yes.
alert, it's probably not mom life.
Yeah, right. In case you didn't catch that earlier. No, I love it. I was like, that's such a perfect name for that group. So I will make sure to put all of that in the show notes so that people can easily find you. But Jeannie's amazing. She has amazing content in her group. She's just a phenomenal practitioner. And so, Jeannie, I just want to say thank you for sharing your time with us today. And I can't wait to hear how people love this episode with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
You're welcome.